What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for episode 1 of building a UT-AT in Lego. This video might be a little rough. This is the first mock update I've made since beginning of June, and that was like the tail end of Coruscant, so I was in my mock building prime. A lot's happened from then to now. But that was one of the purposes of this whole series, is to help me practice, improve, and kind of get back into update making shape per se. This episode is going to be the vision boarding and planning one. We're going to sit down, take a real in-depth look at the UT-AT, break down the different sections, features, functions, and build to help really, establish a good understanding of what this looks like and how it performs and operates. Because the more you understand something, the easier it is to build and visualize. But that being said, there will also still be some building. I'm thinking about making this tank a UCS scaled one. So I'm going to take a look at how big that would be. I'm also going to be starting the frame, building some of the repulsors that go underneath, and if we're lucky, building part of the interior. All that being said, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button, and let's get it. Before I start building, we need to familiarize ourselves with the UT-AT, or Unstable Terrain Artillery Transport. It's a vehicle shrouded in mystery, since if you're not a sweaty nerd like me, this is probably the only time you've seen it. Lucky for me, it's a pretty simple blocky build with a front that looks similar to an ATTE but with 3 massive cannons instead of 1. The rear of the tank holds up to 20 clones and has 4 anti-personnel cannons on the roof. The bottom of the tank is what really sets it apart from anything else in the Republic Army. It has 2 rows of 8 repulsors that allows the tank to move around like a hover tank. But these repulsors can change position and create a force field connecting the vehicle to the ground. This allows the tank to stick like a magnet to the terrain underneath regardless of how rocky or broken up it is, allowing the big guns to fire with extreme accuracy. Hence the name Unstable Terrain Artillery Transport. So now that we know what the different sections look like, when I first started thinking about this mock, I was going to go with a minifig scale tank since, why not? That's one of my favorite sizes to build and work with and display, and I have the time and pieces, but I quickly ran into a potential problem. If this were a flat terrain mock like Naboo or Geonosis, I would have all the room I need for a big old tank to cruise around, but Megiddo is a series of bridges and a cliff. I can only make the bridge where the tank is so wide before it will look bad and maybe break, so I'm limited on size here. One of my friends did the math for me, and a minifig scaled UT-AT would be about 18 inches long and 10 inches wide. So my initial thoughts are not too bad. What I need to do now is build a rough shape in that size and then build a mock-up of the bridge and see how the two match up and if they fit together well, and to see if I need to shrink down the tank or widen the bridge. There are a handful of Lego UT-ATs out there, 2 of which I really like. The first being designed by my friend Tony Hardy. This is a great scale model, and one I actually initially considered using for the mock, but I'm hoping to go bigger in size. The second one is this one, designed by Mangetsu. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just going to say Mangetsu. I really like this design, and it's much closer to the size I was hoping to build. I like the repulsors on this one too. Using the Technic parts really captures the right mechanical look in my opinion, and I'll definitely be using those as inspiration. Alright, I got the bridge and the tank shape put together. I did add some of the little repulsors on the bottom just kind of for fun, just to help me visualize this a little bit better, how high off the ground it could be. So this would be the size of a minifig scale UT-AT. Obviously the barrels of the guns would stick out a little bit further, and then you'd have a little bit of the cockpit, and then there'd be guns on the side, but the size of the body will be about this big, and the structure underneath is going to be the width of the bridge. I don't want to go too wide because the bridges on Megiddo are very thin and wafer-like, and so I don't want to build a really long thin bridge and have it kind of sag down on either side of the build. So I think this is about as wide as I want to go, plus you can see it's still a pretty wide looking bridge. And then here on the side we have kind of roughly the size of the width that the edges will be. So between the edge of the bridge, this part, and the tank, I'll have about 5 studs on each side, which you can see is enough room for a minifig to fit, but it's very cramped. I want there to be space. I want these bridges to appear big, and if I have this massive tank barely squished on there, that's not really going to feel realistic. You wouldn't really want to drive a tank into a situation like that, because if there's any little bit of rubble or any kind of a wall, it could be stopped. So I think I'm going to shrink this down. You can also see at minifig scale, this tank would be massive compared to the minifigs. So I'm going to shrink it down a little bit and kind of show you guys what the new size will be. This looks much better. It just feels like it's in a more proper scale with the bridge. So I took 6 studs off the side and then about 8 studs off the front. And even though that may seem like a lot, you need to remember the panels that are going to be angled on the sides, kind of the walls and the front of the vehicle, are going to hang over the plate. This isn't the actual end of the tank. This is the end of the frame. So, it's still going to jut out this way. So I may end up taking even more off and, you know, maybe shortening this a little bit because it'll be sticking out. But I feel like I just need a general frame of reference before I start building the actual frame so I know how big it's going to be. I'm going with black for the foundation of the tank since the repulsors are black, and I want everything down there to match. That way it'll all look like one cohesive section of the tank. Also, the black really blends together and hides small mistakes and other things, so it'll be harder to see if anything down there ends up looking weird, and it won't require a ton of detail work. With those weird repulsors on the bottom and the strange body shape with the turrets, but the more I've studied this tank and how it functions and what it can do, I've really come to appreciate its uniqueness and beauty a lot more. I'm going to build a couple of repulsors to figure out how they're going to connect to the tank and at what angle they're going to sit underneath it. Once again, Mangetsu came in clutch with some underside pics of his tank, which really helped me out. The downside to having everything be black is it's a pain to film because the black throws off the exposure and makes the shots super bright, and it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. All right, check this. I got the foundation or kind of like bottom frame put together. I tapered it towards the top just to kind of represent, you know, this part right here is kind of taper in this way, and then right up here will be the cockpit. Back here is kind of like the biggest, widest section. I got the 2 repulsors built and put in as well, which is really nice. I'm really happy about that. To kind of finally be able to like visualize what they're going to look like. It's kind of hard to see everything because, you know, black on black is kind of hard to see, but hopefully you guys can get a good idea of what's going on here. So this is what each of the repulsors is going to look like. Pretty simple, kind of like a ski or skid thing at an angle like that. I basically used the same design of the ATUT that I'm referencing just because it was such a good design. I liked the idea of it being Technic because it's such a vastly different section of the build, you know, like you've got like these repulsors on the bottom of the tank, and so I wanted to represent how different it was from the rest of the build by having a different kind of Lego. So, you know, the top part, the rest of the build is going to be brick and plate, but right here is going to be smooth, very mechanical looking Technic. I did make some changes to mine, however. I stuck this peg through the top just because I noticed the prong at the end of the repulsor is actually connected, and then my shock right here is a little bit different, and the way it connects to the vehicle is different. So while I did take a lot of inspiration and borrowed some of his designs, I'll definitely be adding my own creative twist to this and be doing things a little bit differently. I put these shocks in for a couple of reasons. First, for, you know, structural reasons, it'll help make this repulsor rigid so it can support the skid right here. But the reason the tank has these is because when it moves over rough terrain, you know, these things can move and adjust and kind of allow it to navigate and go over all different kinds of stuff and then lock into position over all different kinds of terrain. So it allows each one of the skids to be able to go like that and kind of move. Initially, I was trying to include all 8 skids on the bottom of the tank, and then I realized, why am I trying to do that? I'm not making this to scale. It's smaller than the actual tank, so why do I have to include all 16 of the repulsors? So I'm only going to be having 6 on each side instead of 8, and I think that looks really nice. One of the reasons I decided to give this tank its own series is so that I'd be able to take more time to design stuff like a good interior and make a more complete vehicle, instead of just like some random shell I throw into a build. I'm going to add the seating section now with a little walkway in between 2 rows of seats. That's the main thing I want to have inside, and if I have more space later on, I want to add gunner stations for the anti-personnel cannons. I knew an interior would be a big request from you guys as well because y'all love your interiors for some reason. This will be the first vehicle I've ever designed to actually include an interior. So I do actually think this is going to be kind of fun, especially because it's not a giant building or base. So there doesn't have to be a ton of detail. It's just adding small little things to kind of add that extra sense of realism and playability. And because the back of the tank is just a big rectangle, I've got lots of room and don't have to work around any crazy angles or designs. The front of the tank, on the other hand, is another story. Ugh. So this is basically what I was able to come up with in this episode, and I am very pleased. I'm liking the look of this. I ended up shrinking it down a little bit more width and lengthwise, I think. Actually, no, I added to the length and then made it a little bit skinnier, and I really like how it's sitting on the bridge already. It just looks so much better. And even if there are people out there who are like, it's a little bit too skinny, remember by the time like the side panels are on, that you got to add an extra 3 to 4 studs on each side, as well as like the gun emplacements that are going to be on the side. So this frame is going to be smaller than the actual tank is. The interior is looking pretty good as well. Just, you know, pretty simple design. I didn't really have any crazy wants or expectations with this, but we've got a seat for clones with a rifle rack next to them. Really didn't think I needed anything else. Now that I do think about it, The Galactic Marines that I'm going to be using do have a backpack, so I might end up maybe making like a backpack section where they can put their packs if they want to transport, or maybe like I'll make like something behind it. I don't know. I've got so much room to work with, which is really nice. I think I'm going to be adding some gunner stations and extra storage back here too. As for placement goes, this could change. The seats could be moved more back this way, further that way, or I might end up having more seats. I mainly just put this in here for something to do and to kind of give myself an idea of what the interior is going to look like. I started the seats pretty far in just because I knew this back panel is going to be at an angle, so I didn't want to put the seats too close to that and not have enough headroom for the clones to be able to sit down. So this could change once I get that back in and see where I can actually start them. Like I already said, I am just loving how the repulsors look. I think this is going to make such a cool and unique looking tank. I moved this one over to that side so I was able to stack or connect two next to each other, and it looks really cool. So when this thing's all and done, we're gonna have a pretty special tank. I am rusty. I could feel it the most after the time lapses when I was doing the little building updates, because I just struggled to know what to say or kind of how to like update you guys on what I had done or what the build was looking like in an interesting way. And I wasn't sure kind of like how in depth I should go with the problem solving or creative process of some of these smaller components and how they came together. So let me know in the comments if you like a more in-depth update where I'm going real deep into problems and issues that I'm having with each individual thing and like how I've worked through those or how I'm going to, or if you like a more kind of generalized overview of what's going on and how the build's coming together, minus me diving into the weeds over small things. Thank the Lego gods for Mangetsu and their epic UTAT build. I can already tell their build is going to be a huge staple and source of inspiration for this series, because you saw how much I referenced it, and not only that, I got a better idea of what the actual UTAT looks like and how it all comes together from their build than I did any Star Wars reference material, because there just isn't a lot, so I honestly don't know how they were able to come up with what they did. That being said, that wraps up this update. Don't forget to let me know what you thought of everything down below in the comments, and I'll catch you next time, but until then, happy building.